Shalom. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabushai, Bahashem, Racha Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabushai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabushai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabushai. And pretty much like I said in previous videos, I'm going to be going over, the book of Hebrews, all the chapters. So I'm going to try to the best of my abilities to do like a chapter or two a day. All right. So pretty much in this lesson, I'm going to go over Hebrews, the 11th chapter, in which it names different Israelite men that had a great deal of faith. And when they was challenged by the Most High at that generation to display their faith, they did it. All right. So, you read these stories because when you read Romans 15:4, it says the things written aforetime is written for our learning. So that's the whole duty of the Israelite man, all right, to prove his faith to Yahweh and Yahabushai through grace ultimately, all right? So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to read in the NLT version, all right? Now, this is Hebrews, the 11th chapter in the NLT version, and this is getting into great examples of faith, which faith is key, all right? Hebrews 11:1, it says, faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see, because we understand that the God of Israel, Yahweh, as well as his only begotten son, Yahabushai, they are not mortal men, that lie. See, mortal men, they make promises that they know they're not going to be able to keep, or that they won't keep, for their own agendas, right? But when you're dealing with Yahweh and Yahabushai, they are bonded by their word. So any oath or promise that Yahweh and Yahabushai made to our forefathers or the Israelites in general, he's going to keep that. See, everything that's written within the scriptures, it will come to pass, whether people want to believe it or not. And what's already written, the victory that the elect of the nation of Israel is going to get through Yahabushai's blood and sacrifice. That's how we're going to overcome the New World Order, Jacob's trouble, the persecution, the hour of temptation, when they make the mark of the beast, which is the RFID chip implant, mandatory very soon, because that's the next major prophecy. All right, and that's how we're going to escape the nuclear destruction, through Yahabushai when he returns back by the way of the so-called UFOs. All right, so our victory is already written, right? We just got to let things play out. Verse 2, through their faith, the people, right? What people? Israelites, right? Chosen Israelites, elected Israelites, right? Israelites that kept the faith to the very end. Israelites, when they was challenged to display their faith, they didn't think twice. They didn't doubt Yahweh and Yahabushai. It says, the people in days of old earn a good reputation, a.k.a. a good report. And that's ultimately what you want, all right? You don't come into this truth, to try and get brownie points or be some type of teacher's pet or seek vain glory. We're not in this for vain glory or our own ulterior motives. We're in this truth because Yahweh, through Yahabushai, called us into this truth, and Lord willing, we're chosen. Lord willing, everything that we do through faith, through grace, Lord willing, we are a part of the elect and will receive salvation, and that we're written in the Lamb's book of life. All right? The scriptures tell you faith without works is dead. So you have to have works as a sinner that's called back to repentance, because Yahabushai didn't die for us to be lazy. The grace period is not for you to be lazy. The grace period is for you to spread the gospel so that the end could come, right? It says, verse 3, by faith we understand that the entire universe was formed at the Most High's command. Yes, because when you read Colossians, the first chapter, it says that Yahweh, he gave Yahushua the design or the blueprint of how he wants everything created. All right, whether it be the right hand or the left hand, you know, the different angels, you know, the demons on the left hand side, you know, the principalities, the heathen nations, the different planets, everything you can think of. All right, all that was created through the will of the Most High, but through Yahushua, as well as the elect, when you get the proper understanding from the men of Great Millstone through the Holy Spirit. All right. So it says that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. Exactly. Because as long as we are in this mortal flesh, we can't see the spiritual world. All right. Going down here now, verse 4. Now it's going to start naming some of our righteous forefathers, right? Hebrews 11:4. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to the Most High than Cain did. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and the Most High showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. All right? And it's not like Cain wasn't told what type of offering to offer up. He just didn't listen. And then he got so envious of his brother that he murdered his brother. Going back to Genesis, the 3rd chapter, how the Most High said that it's going to be enmity between the two opposing seeds. All right? You had Abel, you had Cain, you had Jacob, you had Esau, right? Then you got Jacob's descendants, and then you got the Edomites' descendants, all right? The so-called white man and his seed line. So there was always friction, all right? There was always war. There was always a difference. One, the vessel of honor, right? And then you got the other vessels fitted to destruction. You got good versus evil. So it goes on to say, Hebrews 11:5 now. So the example of Abel's faith, you could read about that in Genesis, the 4th chapter, all right, from verses 1 through 16. Now we're going to get to Enoch, and you could read about Enoch's example of faith in Genesis, the 5th chapter, all right, from verses 18 through 24. And then it has some other scriptures here, all right? See, the Most High, he had to take Enoch away at this specific generation because everybody was getting more wicked. So now let's read this. So this is Hebrews 11:5 NLT. It says, it was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying, because if he would have remained there, he would have ended up getting corrupted. It says without dying, right? Because he was translated by a so-called UFO. It beamed him up. It says without dying, you know, the same way Elijah was beamed up. He disappeared because the Most High took him. How did the Most High take him? By the way of the so-called UFOs, the chariots of Israel. It says, for before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased the Most High. And Enoch being delivered from wickedness, that's a prelude to how we are going to be delivered in this lifetime. We're going to be beamed up by the so-called UFOs before the nuclear destruction happens. All right. It says, verse 6, and it is impossible to please the Most High without faith. So if you claim to be an Israelite that's in this truth, an Israelite man, right? How do you please the Most High? Well, you have to learn this truth. You got to learn how to spread the correct gospel. You got to know how to teach the correct doctrine. And you got to understand that this truth is only meant for the elect of the nation of Israel to obtain and receive. But you got to learn how to break the scriptures down by the men that Yahushua set up, which is the men of Great Millstone, all right, beginning with the leadership, the apostles, right? So then you could prove your faith like that. You could be charitable, you know, give tithes to the apostles, but ultimately the maximum way to prove your faith to Yahushua is by spreading this gospel, all right? And then for you Hebrew Israelite women, right, you so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native American Indians, you're the biblical Israelites. For our woman, you have to serve your man, whether he's a believing husband or even if he's a non-believing husband. You still have to serve your man, all right? You got to aid your man in the time of distress, whether that be emotional support, whether that be financial support. You have to serve your husband. Your job is not to teach the Bible, because that's serving authority over the man, and the scriptures is against that. So continuing on, it says, anyone who wants to come to him must believe that he exists, that the Most High exists. And that's literally what his name is, Yahweh. He exists, he to be, he is, right? And that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. And the Most High will bless you, all right? But this is a thing of balance, being in this truth, because you have to bear your cross. You're going to go through spiritual lows. You're going to catch a lot of, hells in the form of tribulations. You're going to deal with a lot of supernatural hindrances being in this truth. But when you're going through those trials and tribulations, don't forget about Yahweh and Yahawashi. Always pray to Yahweh and Yahawashi, because ultimately it's just a test. It's a test of reaction. You're being challenged on earth from the powers, that's unseen, right? The Most High, Yahawashi, to display your faith. So don't doubt the Lord when you're going through your trial or tribulation, because at the end of the day, that's all you have, being alive. All you really have is Yahweh and Yahawashi, because everybody could turn their back on you. People could betray you. Your woman could leave you, all right? Your so-called friends, they could betray you. Everybody could just betray you. So then who you have at the end of the day? You have Yahweh and Yahawashi, and it's truth. So you can't forget that, when you catch in hell. So, but on the flip side, the Most High, he'll bless you for passing these particular challenges that he sets in your way. So it's a thing of balance. So it goes on to say, and that he rewards those that sincerely seek him, which ultimately is going to be who? The elect of the nation of Israel. And through Yahawashi, we're going to be blessed. All right, we're going to step into that new covenant when we receive salvation. Lord willing, I'll be a part of the elect. And what's promised us? Immortality. We're going to get the promised land of Israel back. We're going to be ruling over the heathen nations forever. We're never going to die. We're never going to go into captivity. We're going to be able to explore the different universes, right? The different galaxies, intergalactic travel, having our own chariots, having our families, having successful relationships according to the laws, statutes, and commandments, being able to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments perfectly. There's a lot to look forward to, but we have to endure unto the end. Then we can get our reward through and by Yahawashi. All right? So now, verse 7, it says, it was by faith that Noah built a large boat, a.k.a. Noah's Ark, to save his family from the flood. So anytime the Most High brought some type of calamity upon the earth, the Most High always saved the righteous. And this flood is known as the first death, because the Lord, at that specific generation, he destroyed the whole known world by the way of water, by the way of the flood. Now, this time, he's not going to do that, because that's what the rainbow represents when you read Genesis, the 9th chapter. And that's the Most High's covenant with the world, that he's not going to flood the earth again. Now, this time, when you read about the second death in the New Testament, that's referring to what? Nuclear destruction by the way of fire. All right? So the ones that's going to be saved from the nuclear destruction is who? The elect of the nation of Israel. All right? So it goes on to say, it says, he obeyed the Most High, who warned him about things that had never happened before. Because the way how the Most High used to water the crops and stuff like that was from the dew from heaven, like that mist. It never rained before. So Noah, for over 100+ years, he was prophesying that what? A flood is coming. And because people at that specific generation never heard of or never seen these things before, they didn't believe. They probably thought Noah was crazy. Oh, you wasting your time. Oh, don't pay him no mind. Let's go party. Let's go get married. Let's go get drunk. Let's just live it up. We alive, right? So that's the type of mindset people got right now. Because the elect men, the prophets right now that's on earth, we're pretty much in Noah's stead. All right? Because Noah ultimately, he represented the elect during that time. So now you have the same thing going out. We warning our people, look, nuclear destruction is getting ready to happen. The mark of the beast is coming. Jacob's trouble is going to get even worse. We're telling them all these calamities, all these economic troubles, the persecution, martial law, the FEMA camps, the detention centers, right? The disease outbreaks, World War III. We telling them all these things is coming to pass, and you could actually see these things. There's news articles on it. They talk about it on mainstream media, right? And they still are ignoring the Lord. So now, when all hell break loose, the doors of mercy is going to be closed for Israel. All right? So it says, yep, he obeyed the Most High who warned him about things that had never happened before. By his faith, you can read about that in Genesis, the 6th chapter, as you can see up here, right? Genesis, the 6th chapter, from like verses 5 on down, and the chapters after that too. It says, by his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world. This is what we're doing right now. It says, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. So the Most High, Yahweh, he found grace, right? He granted Noah grace. The same thing that applies to the elect of the nation of Israel, to where we're not going to be destroyed with the world, right? Now, let's get to our forefather Abraham, one of the fathers of the promise. Hebrews 11:8. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when the Most High called him to leave home and go to another land that the Most High would give him as his inheritance, which would be the promised land of Israel. It says he went without knowing where he was going. And you can read about this in Genesis, the 15th chapter. I'm not going to read it, but Genesis, the 15th chapter, all right? As well as Genesis, the 21st chapter on down, right? Verse 9, it says, and even when he reached the land the Most High promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob. Those are the fathers of the promise, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So if you are not a descendant of Jacob by your father's seed, then you're not an Israelite. Because the promises, the adoption, the giving of the law, the blessings that the Israelites is going to receive in the kingdom of heaven, you're not going to get that if you don't come from that seed line. All right? It goes on to say, yep, who inherited the same promises. It says, verse 10, Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by the Most High. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old, right? And that's why she named Isaac Yatazak, I believe that's his name was. It means laughter, because she laughed when an angel told her, look, you're going to have a child, all right? She was like 90 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So she laughed, and then the angel asked her, why you laughing? Like, what's so funny? I'm telling you what the Most High told me to tell you, all right? And then eventually it came to pass. But it says she believed that the Most High would keep his promise, which he did. And so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead, a nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky, and the sand on the seashore, there is no way to count them. Exactly. All right. Because each tribe is like a nation. I mean, look at end time prophecy. When you read Second Esdras, the 13th chapter, about the lost 10 tribes of Israel, right? Scriptures also say, Genesis, the 49th chapter, where the Israelites will be at in the last days. Jeremiah 15:33, the southern and northern kingdom, they will be oppressed together. So when you look at the different tribes and where they will be scattered at in the last days, each tribe is like its own country. It's like its own nation. I mean, look at Argentina. Look at Colombia. Look at Brazil. Look at where the tribes is at. Jamaica, these different Caribbean islands, North America, right? Central and South America. Each tribe is like a nation within itself. And that's what Abraham's name means. Abraham's name, it means father of a multitude, because out of Abraham's seed, multitude of nations was born, including the chosen seed line, the seed of the promise, which is the Israelites. All right. So it goes on to say, verse 13, all these people died still believing what the Most High had promised them. And that's the thing. You want to endure unto the end. We don't know when our end is going to be, but you want to keep glorifying Yahweh and Yahweh Shai to the very end. You don't want to leave this truth. It says, they did not receive what was promised, like the prophets, right? It says, but they saw it all from a distance and welcomed it. And that's like us today. We see it from a distance. We measure the time diligently. We know that it's coming very soon, our glorious kingdom, where we can have rest, but there's still things that got to be done, right? There's still prophecies that have to be fulfilled. It says, they agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on earth, right? Pilgrims. It says, obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. And our people as a whole, we don't have that, because we've been scattered, all right? It says, verse 15, if they had longed for the country they came from, they could have gone back. But they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. This is what we're looking forward to, a heavenly homeland, to where we can live there in peace and harmony, be able to keep the law, statutes, and commandments perfectly, have those perfect, immortal extraterrestrial bodies. All right, fully be under that new covenant. That's what we're looking forward to, the kingdom of heaven, the promised land of Israel. All right. That is why the Most High is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Verse 17. Now it's going to name you some more examples. It says, it was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when the Most High was testing him. And you can read about that in Genesis, the 22nd chapter, right? It says, I'm going to read it again from the top, Hebrews 11:17. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when the Most High was testing him, right? He was challenging him to display his faith. In the same way how Abraham is challenged to display his faith, the Most High can do that to you as well in a different way. It says, Abraham, who had received Yahweh's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son Isaac, even though the Most High had told him Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. Meaning that what? Although out of Abraham, he had other seeds, the other seeds, they weren't the seed of the promise. Isaac is the seed of the promise. And then out of Isaac come Jacob, right? It says 19. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, the Most High was going to bring him back to life again, because our people, they understood reincarnation. Reincarnation, regeneration, that's a part of our culture. That's a part of our heritage. That's all throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, all right? It says, and in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. And you can read about that in Genesis, the 48th chapter, right? And then they have another example in Genesis, the 50th chapter, going into the bones, all right? I'm going to get to that point right now. It says, let's see, where was that? Okay, Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 21. It says, it was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he had leaned on his staff. Because Ephraim and Manasseh, they was amalgamated into the tribes. All right, they are a part of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why they have an inheritance in the promised land of Israel, right? When you look at the ancient maps, it says, it was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. And that's in Genesis, the 50th chapter, as I showed on the screen briefly, right? Now we're going to look into Moses, his example of faith, right? So now this is Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 23. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. And you can read about this account in Exodus, the 2nd chapter. It says, they saw that the Most High had given them an unusual child, meaning he was a special child, right? It says, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Like I said, you can read about that in Exodus, the 2nd chapter. You can read the whole account, right? Because in this chapter, it's pretty much summarizing different generations of faith from our forefathers, right? It says, verse 25, he chose to share the oppression of the Most High's people, which is only the Israelites, the seed line of Jacob, instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Hamashiach than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. Exactly, because if he would have sold out and did that, that's temporal, right? Now, when you're dealing with suffering for Yahweh's namesake in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to have everything abundance and 100-fold. It's going to be permanent, the possessions we're going to have. So it's better to suffer now and rest later than to rest now and get destroyed by the nuclear destruction, right? It says, verse 26 again. It says, he thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Hamashiach than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. You can read about that in Exodus, the 12th chapter, right? That goes into the Passover. It says, he kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible, right? Doing what Yahweh commanded at the time. It says, it was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts. See, now in this particular generation, we keep the Passover like how Yahweh kept his Passover concerning the Last Supper. So you're going to notice, like, you have the camp. Now they're known as House of Bread, but, they used to be a part of Sakari. This dude actually put actual lamb's blood on his apartment doorpost or his brownstone, wherever he lives at, the doorpost, because he did a public video on it. You don't have to do stuff like that, all right? The Most High don't care about stuff like that, I mean, if you're doing it and that's your faith, hey, that's between you and the Most High. But Here at Great Millstone, we keep the Passover in remembrance of Yahushua. That's how the Most High wants you to keep the Passover. All right? Continuing on. It says, so that the angel of death, which if you got understanding, once you get the correct understanding, you'll understand that that angel of death, that was actually Yahushua. Because Paul, he goes into that in the book of Corinthians. I don't know if it's the 1st or 2nd Corinthians, the 10th chapter, but like around verses 2 through 5, it mentions that. All right. But like I said, it's best for you to build yourself up and learn the basics before you start getting into topics like that. So it says, so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. It was by faith that the people of Israel went through the Red Sea, right? The northern part of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Suez. It says, as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. It says it was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, and the walls came crashing down. It was by faith that Rahab, the prostitute, or Rahab the harlot, because she was an actual Canaanite, it says was not destroyed with the people, because that was the agreement, all right? Because she had to hide, the two messengers, if I'm saying that correctly. You could read the story yourself, but she hid the messengers. And because she kept her agreement when there was time, right, then the Most High spared her life at that particular generation. That don't mean that she was an Israelite. Her life was just spared because she was looking ahead. She was thinking about her own survival. All right? So continuing on. So when you read the story about Rahab the harlot, because I recently did a video on that, but my channel got taken down by some assholes. But the point is, the reason why the Most High spared her life is because she kept her vow. She kept her promise. So when you read the story about Rahab the harlot, that don't mean Gentiles could be saved. All right? She just kept her agreement. And when she died in that present generation, that was it. Continuing on now. It says, Hebrews 11:31 NLT version. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute or the harlot was not destroyed with the people, right, the Canaanites, in her city, who refused to obey the Most High. For she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Yeah, she hid the spies, right? It says, how much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets, right? Even including right now. Everything that we doing right now, right? Where brothers got to deal with, being challenged to display their faith, catching hell. This is going to be talked about in the kingdom. Because we're the only righteous ones on the planet Earth through grace, through the blood and sacrifice of Yahushua, teaching this truth. So in the kingdom, people who's going to praise us, the rest of the nation of Israel that's born back, they're going to be praising us for our good deeds. And Yahweh and Yahushua, they're going to exalt us, first beginning with the 12 disciples on down. All the prophets is going to be, exalted. But first, Yahweh and Yahushua, they got to be exalted. All right? So it goes on to say, verse 33. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what the Most High had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. Because the scriptures say what? David, he killed tens of thousands, right? You had Samson, he took the jawbone of a donkey and killed over 1,000 people, right? War is all throughout the Bible, but the Most High was with us. You had David, he went up against Goliath, the champion of the Philistines, And what's the famous quote of King David? When you read, I believe it's 1 Samuel the 17th chapter, when he fights Goliath, he said, "What? You stand in front of me with a spear and a shield," roughly paraphrasing, "but I stand before you in the name of Yahweh." When you read stories like that, that's supposed to like amp you up in the spirit and like give you goosebumps, to keep the faith, to don't doubt. Even if the situation you're going through, it seemed rough on the outside looking in, it seemed impossible. But hey, if Yahweh and Yahweh is with you and you don't have wavering faith, you're going to overcome that obstacle through Yahweh. All right? So when you read them stories, it's meant to what? Build your faith up. Because we alive in this present generation, we got to prove our faith to Yahweh and Yahweh. All right? Just like how our ancient forefathers, the prophets of old, they was challenged to display their faith. We being challenged to display our faith. All right? So it goes on to say, verse 35. Women received their loved ones back again from death, but others were tortured. Yeah, you can read about stories like this in the book of Maccabees. You had women that they didn't consent to Antiochus Epiphanes, rules and regulations. Because when you read First Maccabees, the first chapter, he made a decree throughout all his empire at that time, the Seleucid Empire, that we would have to leave our laws, statutes, and commandments, meaning not to keep them. And that was a law. That was a draconian law back during that time. And that we had to keep the customs and believe in the philosophies of the Greeks, which is Hellenization. All right? So you had wicked Israelites that consented to that. But then you had righteous Israelites, men, women, children, that didn't consent. And they got put to death, but they died with honor. And that's something that you want to have being in the truth. You want to die with honor. Even during the time of the hour of temptation, when we're faced with death, whatever brothers is faced with that, right? You want to die with honor. You want to say, to hell with you and your microchip implant. I only worship Yahweh and Yahweh, nothing else. So you want to die with honor if you have to die with honor. You want to keep the faith unto the end. You don't want to do all these works, all them winters, all them summers, being in the camp, doing the street ministry, being the most charitable, cool guy, brother. And then at the very last moment, you take the microchip implant. That will bring dishonor on you. All right. So it says, let me read that again. Hebrews 11:35. Continuing on, it says, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from the Most High in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection because they knew that they was going to come back in a reincarnation and that Yahweh, through Yahweh, will have mercy upon them. And they knew that they would be a part of the elect, that they will receive salvation in these last days by the way of Yahweh when he returns back, right? So that's the mindset you want to have. It says 36, some were jeered at and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half, like Isaiah, by Manasseh. All right, which Manasseh, he repented, but you still got Isaiah killed. You got him cut in half. It says, and others were killed with the sword. Yeah, you have examples like that, of elect, putting other elect members to death, like the situation with Saul and Stephen. But then Saul, he repented from that when he became known as the Apostle Paul. King Manasseh, although he got Isaiah killed and cut in half, literally, he repented. That's what the prayer of Manasseh is all about. So even though the elect could commit sins worthy of death because we're not perfect in this sinful flesh, through Yahweh's blood and sacrifice, as long as we don't blaspheme the Holy Spirit, right, and blaspheme this truth, we could be forgiven. as long as we repent from that wickedness. All right? Continuing on, it says, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. Because the prophets always got treated like shit. All right? It says, they were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains. That makes me think about John the Baptist, right? Hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these people earn a good reputation, aka a good report, because of their faith. Yet none of them receive all that the Most High had promised, because it wasn't time yet. This is the generation, Lord willing, all right, when Yahushua is going to come back. When he comes back, then we're going to get everything that the Most High promised us from the beginning, from those particular generations, all right? It says, for the Most High has something better in mind for us, because everything is predestinated. It all goes back to predestination, right? So that they will not reach perfection without us, all right? So, I just want to go over Hebrews, 11. It's a good chapter to read. You have men that prove their faith, and you got to understand, you got to prove your faith as an individual to Yahweh and Yahushua. So, Lord willing, you was edified. Shalom.